Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're just getting ready here to get started with this month's edition of Coffee and Real Estate live stream. For those of you who've already joined us, thanks for taking the time out. I appreciate it. Hopefully, we can get whatever questions you might have answered. I'm just doing the usual check to make sure everything is A-OK, so just bear with me for a moment. I hope everyone's having a good weekend. I had a great time yesterday at my son's graduation. Maybe we'll I don't know. It was kind of a classic thing, I guess. There was definitely some odd stuff. Maybe we can share it. Sort of interesting insights into life, I guess you could say. Boy, I do love my sons, but I hate how sometimes I definitely call it when I know something weird's gonna happen, or anticipate oddities, and then they actually happen. Okay, it looks like we are up and going. Fan freaking tastic. We will go ahead and assume we are good, and get started today. I've got a lot of interesting things to chat with you about. Some of it's really interesting from a geek standpoint, uh, a numbers geek standpoint. All right. See, look at that. We even have a fancy Christmas transition from entry card to me. Welcome to it. I hope you're all, as I said, having a great weekend. The name of the show is Coffee and Real Estate. So today we're going to have Starbucks. I'm not doing my home ground stuff this weekend with all the things going on with graduations and whatnot. I didn't have time to do as much prep as I normally do. This month we have some interesting numbers that just kind of blow my mind. I don't know how much they'll blow your mind, but we'll find out. But I've also this month got some interesting news items that I think when you start to engage the brain a little bit and do a little bit more analysis, you realize that, man, it's another one of those situations where some of these stories just don't, the narrative that's getting pushed just doesn't really jive with reality in a lot of ways. So we'll cover that because I think these are tidbits of information that actually absolutely should inform anyone who's out there buying, selling, or investing in real estate. In addition, I've had some folks give me some feedback, and I'm all about before the COVID hit us. This, as I've said before, this was a very different experience. This used to be an actual physical meetup at like a local Starbucks or whatever. And I'd meet with people and we would just chat about real estate, right? It was a lot less formalized. I occasionally would have some data relating to the stuff I share with you in this particular live chat, but a lot of it was just anecdotal, talking about experiences, what worked for you, what worked for me. And I'm kind of hoping to translate some of that over into this experience. But some feedback I've gotten is that listeners would like to cover news items or discussing the local market anecdotally more than getting into the nitty gritty of a lot of data, and maybe just focus on one or two of the biggest statistical things I've noticed as opposed to going through the whole thing. And I'm totally fine with doing that. I was thinking about maybe just covering some of the super highlights of each month and then doing not a podcast on it, but a post on my website with all the screenshots of all the data. And then for those who are more interested in diving deep, we can do that. So if that's something you agree with, if you think that would be a better format, I'd love to get feedback from more than just, the one or two people who've reached out and made that suggestion. But we can absolutely do that. I think what we will do this weekend, though, is we will sort of just zip right through the stats for this last month. Let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and jump in and take a look. So we're going to go ahead and look at November straight up to start with and see how we feel about these numbers. Now, there's going to be some interesting things you're going to note right off the bat. Now, remember, what we're looking at here is, and let me introduce myself for those of you who might be new. My name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a real estate broker in Morgan Hill, California, and I've been doing real estate since 1988. So a very long time ago. Started off as a real estate agent. In 2004, I got my broker's license so I could start my own company. That is I think that's an interesting conversation to have over an adult beverage as to why I did that. But I've been very happy working for myself, by myself, occasionally having folks coming into the brokerage. Um, but love the world of real estate and happy to help people reach their real estate goals. So if I can help you, let me know. You can find me at soldbyrobert.com. Okay. The chat is up. Chat's ready to go. It looks like everything's working, so feel free to ask any questions. You can ask questions you have about your specific transaction or something you've always wondered about real estate as it and obviously I'm a California real estate broker. I realize I have folks who reach out to me from Canada and Mexico and England and France and all these other places. Can't tell you as much there. I can tell you a little bit about England. I lived in England for a couple of years in just outside of London, but so I have a little experience with how their stuff works, which is very different from how our stuff works. But feel free, happy to try to answer any questions I can, or at least maybe help you discover the answer to the question live. So always happy to help. We're going to go ahead and start off with the total active listings. This is a very interesting number this month, particularly for when we're going to get into a little bit more detail on it in sort of a story fashion as it relates to Morgan Hill. But let's go ahead and just run down the numbers here because they're kind of nuts. In terms of total active listings, this is all the homes available for sale in the month of November. We had a 56% decrease in Santa Clara County in the number of homes that were on the market at all, right? Whether they got listed during the month or had entered the month of November already listed. This is what you had as a buyer to choose from, right? So if you were looking to buy in the month of November, these are the listings that would have showed up if you did a search on any of these areas. And for all of Santa Clara County, it went down from, which is nuts, 1,659 to 726 listings. Keep in mind, that is fewer listings than just San Jose had at the same time last year, right? It's insane. So 56.2% drop. San Jose, 773 listings available in November of 2020, and in November of 2021, 329. So a higher drop of 57.4%. Morgan Hill, less of a huge drop. And again, because of the lower sample size, there's a really wide margin of error on this in terms of any conclusions you might want to draw. But in general, the number of homes available for sale was down 36%. And that was from 58 listings to 37 listings, or 58 homes, not homes that got listed in that month, just total. What's going to be interesting is when we go to the new listings number, which is next, note that in Morgan Hill, we had 49 homes listed in that month, which means only 9 homes entered the market in November as already on the market, right? So the story remains inventory is insane. And there's been a lot of interesting news items coming out that's supposed to make us feel better about inventory. And we're going to talk about why we shouldn't. Take that at face value, while we can look at it a little bit more critically and realize it's not what they're selling it as. All right. So anyway, let's move on to new listings. New listings are also down across the board, down 14% in Santa Clara County in general, down 16% in San Jose, and down almost 17% in Morgan Hill. I don't think the specific numbers are that terribly important. The new listings and this is compared to the same time last year. So remember, we're taking a sort of a snapshot of a specific month, comparing it year to year, so that we're normalizing for any seasonal influences, right? So November of one year tends to be similar in terms of environmental influences to the previous year. And you'd think we'd actually see an improvement this year, right? We were much more in the COVID mindset in November of last year than we are of November of this year. So it's interesting to see that we're not doing quote unquote better, I guess. Better meaning more inventory, more homes on the market, more people potentially looking to move. The total number of homes that were sold, on the other hand, now remember, this is the reason this number is limited at all, I think, is more because of an inventory influence than anything else. I think it's been simply there aren't enough houses to buy. But let's go ahead and look through. And I think that's going to be particularly true when we hit Morgan Hill. All right. So total homes sold. In Santa Clara County, it was up 4.5% from about 1,450 homes to 1,510 homes in Santa Clara County. In San Jose, 763 homes in November of 2020, 788 homes in November of 2021 for a 3.3% increase. Morgan Hill, in November of 2020, 70 homes sold. In November of 2021, 49 homes sold for a drop of 30%. Now let's pause on that number for a minute Well, we sold a number of homes last month equal to the number of homes that were listed. So we basically, and remember, only 9 homes entered the market as available. The market entered that month on the market. Only 9 homes. So now, once all that month is all taken care of and all the numbers are set, once we went into November or to December, we ended that month with just 9 homes on the market. Right? Well, in terms of new listings, right? There's clearly going to be more homes actually, and we can do a search real quick here and see how many active listings there are in Morgan Hill right now. But there were only 37 in November. And the reason why that number is lower than the total listing is just obviously because we sold so many of them right at the same time. So crazy numbers. Now, the next one, average list price. Now, this list price is the original list price, meaning this is the number that a seller agreed would be what they would list the house for when they sat down with their agent to sign the listing agreement. I use this number because I think it's reasonable to start with where the expectations were set by the buyer, by the seller and their agent. Interesting to note how much expectations have jumped in some communities. So in Santa Clara County in general, the average list price originally increased 48.8%, 50%. That is insane. I double checked that number for accuracy to see if it was due to some sort of a weird reporting error, and it doesn't appear to have been. I can take another look, but I mean that's insane. That is one of those numbers that makes you think, wow, that's so stinking high. I really think I should double check those numbers to make sure that they're correct. So I will try to invest more time to look into that. But draw from this less, how expensive homes are, and more, what do sellers expect from the market? That's what this number is really telling us, right? So compared to last year, there was definitely this huge increase. Now, since I am seeing such a huge disparity between San Jose and Morgan Hill compared to Santa Clara County, it's my guess that someone somewhere entered a listing for, say, $2 million and added a zero, turning it to $20 million, and then that listing needed to get dropped back down to $2 million or whatever it was. Because it would take something substantial to screw up the numbers for all of the county, right, in order for it to skew it that direction. That would be my guess what happened. But now let's go ahead and look at San Jose. So expectations are up 10% when compared to the same time last year. I don't think that's unusual. I actually think that's fairly in line with the market, and it's actually underestimating on average what they end up getting. Because as you can see from San Jose, for the average sales numbers, it's up 13% on average, right? So there's not a direct one-for-one relationship between those two things, but it's a trend indicator. So in that particular instance, sellers are underestimating what they are ending up getting for their house, at least in the month of November. Morgan Hill saw a 16.8% increase in their expectation of what a home would sell for. And then from comparing it to what we saw in terms of what things sold for, sellers were overestimating in Morgan Hill. So they ended up getting 15.5% compared to the same time last year versus 16.8. So they got about 1% off, which isn't horrible. But it's interesting to see the mindset change for buyers or for sellers. If we go with the average sales price, it increased 13.4% in Santa Clara County, 13% in San Jose, and 15.5% in Morgan Hill. Percent over under asking price. And I know I do this disclaimer every time I talk to this because I took statistics in college. I get it. Taking a percentage of a percentage is kind of a goofy thing, but at least it's an indicator of a trend, right? It's a broad indicator, so I don't feel horrible about it. I realize I'm breaking one of the statistical commandments, but there you go. So for Santa Clara County, folks are getting in this November month of this year, 2021. On average, people were getting 108.1% of their asking price, so 8.1% over asking price, which is an increase of over 5% from the previous year. San Jose, 107.9, so almost the same number, basically 108% for a 4.6 increase from the same time last year. And Morgan Hill, they're 104.7%, 104.7 over asking price, versus the previous year of 101.7, which is a 2.9% increase in that particular number. Um, so still continuing to get more, but and I realize it's crazy. Particularly the Santa Clara County number is ridiculous of 108.1 in general. But it also, if you take into account how low inventory is with such a huge drop, I mean, an over 50% drop in Santa Clara County, right? Almost a 60% drop, right? Only about 4 percentage points shy of it. Given the amount of stresses we're seeing there, it's actually kind of surprising we aren't seeing even higher prices. So I think that's something to keep in mind as we go. While these numbers we look at down here relating to what things are selling for are insane, they're not at the same level of insanity as the inventory numbers. Those insane inventory numbers would say to me that the amount people are paying would be going up more than what we're seeing. And I think in a lot of these areas, what we're actually seeing is price pressures that just can't be met by buyers, right? Not everybody has $3 million to spend on a house. So I think that puts some downward pressure on it. And one of the things I wanted to cover before we move on to general story. Oh, wait, no, let's go ahead and do the rest of this. So overtime tracking for all of Santa Clara County. Let me see if I actually, I blew it. I didn't edit this as I normally do, so that we actually get this month's numbers. I don't know why this one specific set of charts has this problem and the other ones don't. So let's go ahead and look at it over time, right? And as I've mentioned before, I always like to keep an eye on these charts, particularly this first one. Let's see, which is Santa Clara County versus sales price. This is total active listings, new listings, and homes sold. I'm sorry, the chart I just quoted for was actually the one below. I'm a little anal retentive. I want these to line up better. Apologies for that. So we're continuing to see the crossover where new listings takes a huge drop, total active listings takes a huge drop, but homes sold does not. And the only reason that this is dropping is because there are not enough homes to buy. I mean, we just discussed how in a place like Morgan Hill, we're seeing a home margin of like 9 homes, right? In terms of new listings. In terms of days on market, again, I don't think this is a number we need to focus on. It's artificially reduced because agents make it happen that way. Santa Clara County in general, the average list price just kind of shot up here. But we've seen that happen before, and these are also 2 months where it did that because someone entered bad data. So it's not going to surprise me if for Santa Clara County in general, this ends up being the case. So I think the smart call is to base our conclusions or any estimates until I figured out for sure is that this number is probably wrong. The right number for Santa Clara County is probably in the 10 to 15% range, and that this is a statistical anomaly based on bad data that's been entered by a real estate agent, or maybe more than one. So we'll see. All right. In terms of the other data looking back, there's nothing here that really is stuff that's amazing. I really think this is where our focus needs to stay and where it's had to stay for a long time. Inventory is the thing. In terms of looking back just over Morgan Hill, and I get a lot of folks who reach out, Morgan Hill folks specifically, or either folks who are here or folks who want to be here in Morgan Hill. And you can see that we're not as dramatically insane as the county in general. We have total number of homes sold is pretty much matching exactly the homes listed, but our active listings is still way down there. So we're basically selling things as fast as we can list them, with some carryover of homes month to month from past inventory, which switches out, right? Because as we can see, what I did as a result of this, and let's go ahead and call this done. Let's go ahead and switch over to, oh, you know what? I don't even think I can share that. I don't want to share that screen with you because I'm concerned it may have proprietary information on it. So let me sort of share it with you anecdotally, and we will go back to the wonderful, I don't know how useful it is for you to see my ugly face here as we discuss this. But, so I have pulled up every single home that sold in Morgan Hill in the month of November. And of these homes, and I have it sorted by status, almost all of them have sold. As of right now, there are 6 homes that are still active that were listed in November, right? One of them is a category of home. It's in a special buyers program where you have to meet certain requirements. So the idea that it's staying on the market longer makes sense. These homes always do. So really, there's only 5 homes that are currently on the market, and all of them are over 1.2 million. So I think that explains it. One of them has been on the market for 45 days. Some of these don't have days on market data at all, so I'm not real sure why that's the case. Which because it's several of them don't. I'm not real sure what the deal is with that. But anyway, and of those, some of them have had price reductions. The ones that are still on the market as active. One's had a $198,000 price drop. One has had a price increase of $100,000, which is unexplainable. It listed originally at 1.249 and was raised to 1.35. It's been on the market for 14 days. It's only a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,400 square foot home, so I am not real sure what they're thinking. Depends on where. Oh, I'm familiar with this location, so I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, my point being, there are only 6 homes continue to be active out of that original 49 that were listed. There are 5 homes that are active contingent, meaning they have a contract they've accepted, but there are contingencies that need to be released before it can go pending. And then when it goes pending, that means all conditions have been released by the buyer. All contingencies have been released. And then they're ready to move forward. And that makes up the huge chunk of these. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 of these are pending, and the rest are sold. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So 18 of all those that were listed in November are not only, they're done, they are sold. And as I look down the list here, I see that just about all of them. Wow, okay. Almost all of them have ended up selling for more. I see one that sold for 19,000 below asking price. But then I'm seeing ones that are selling for 200 over asking price, 150 over asking price, 100 over asking price, meaning 100,000. 75,000 over asking price. Wow, 200,000 over asking price, 100,000 over asking price, 50,000 over asking price, 60,000 over, 20,000 under, 40,000 over, and 18,000 under. That's an interesting one. 70,000 over and 8,000 under. So, and these are all selling. I'm seeing ones here 0 days on the market, 9 days on the market, 5 days, 2 days on the market. But the point is, and so that covers that's it. All 49 have pretty much sold. One other thing I wanted to do here, because I thought it might be interesting. How many single family condominium or townhouse homes are currently active right now in Morgan Hill? So let's do that. And see, there's a grand total of 26 homes. I want to make sure I've got all these search criteria set correctly. I don't want to make sure there's no other limiting factors. No, it's perfectly clean. Just those homes. So there are fewer homes available right now than were sold in November, right? We sold 49 homes. And some of these have been on the market for an extremely long time. I'm seeing 407 days. I'm seeing 149 days, 170 days. Here's one on Finley Ridge. I'm a fan of Finley Ridge. I've sold quite a few. I've been both a buyer and a seller's agent on Finley Ridge. I don't know who's managing this listing, but you really need to have some specialized knowledge. Who is that? I actually got an interesting. I don't know if this is the time to get into it. I got an interesting phone call from someone. Let me see if this is the agent I think it is. Nope. I wonder if it changed. Interesting. What home is this? Yeah, they're not on the ridge, which is a shame. And that's a horrible photo as the lead photo for that property. Oh, I know this one. Yeah, I've been in this one. I believe this one. The problem with this one is it was built with no permits. But anyway, so that's a whole other topic we can discuss. But anyway, so we have got a grand total of 26 homes listed for sale. Tons of them on the market forever, and a huge chunk of them. Wow, almost all of them. 20 of the 26 are over $1 million, and 18 of them are over 1.2 million. So it's all homes that are really kind of stretching the top limit here. At the top, we've got a home that was listed at $7.8 million. I'm very familiar with this listing, and it has had a $1 million price reduction. And that's nuts. That's kind of crazy. Then we've got a $3.5 million house and a $2.9 million house and a $2.5 million house. No price reductions on that $3.5 million house after 114 days. 53 days for one that's at 2.5 that clearly should have been dropped. But the question becomes at that point, and I realize you're just looking at me and not at this data, but at this point, the question becomes, how smart is that? And if I've got anyone in the chat, I would love to hear you chime in on, what do you think is going to happen with this market? Do you believe that we are going to stay sort of in this crazy growth pattern? Or do you think at some point there's going to be a bubble and it's going to pop? And do you think we're going to see property values drop? When you see listings like this that have been on the market forever, there's obviously the possibility that it's just someone who doesn't have to move. Clearly, for this person who's been here for 162 days, but has dropped their price by $1 million, they've got some interest in moving. But then you get these other ones that have been on the market 170 days or 114 days with no price drops. Here's 149. A lot of these with no price drops. And at some point, you got to ask the question, what's the deal? Are these folks that are so convinced that the market is going to eventually meet them and they'll get their price, or is some of this really just fishing? I'd love to get your feedback and hear what you think about that. But in terms of what the market is right now, it continues to be all about inventory. In fact, I would argue even more now than it has been in past months. We've been doing this now for quite a few months, right? And I can remember the very first ones. It's all about inventory. As much as that was true then, it is way more true now. When you've got literally, if for all houses, single family. I mean, if we could narrow it. For those of you who only want to live in a single family residential home, there are 24 of them in Morgan Hill for sale right now. If you're interested in a condominium, there's one. If you're interested in a townhouse, there is also one. So it's insane. There are a lot more than 24 people shopping for homes in Morgan Hill. I've got at least currently right now, when I checked yesterday, I have got 78 people actively looking for homes in Morgan Hill on my search tool, right? And by active, I mean these are people who are looking every single day when properties come available. They see them immediately. We have conversations about them. So these are a lot of folks who are currently actively looking. I've got some folks looking for very specific homes to meet very specific needs. I even have some folks looking for lots and lands who have given up on finding a house and want to build one. So interesting stuff. Then absolutely tells us a scary story of what buyers are facing, but I think it's interesting to note that kind of stuff. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our web stuff. Where shall we start? I think, we'll do the shameless plug to start. I know I introduced myself earlier in the live chat. This is my website, soldbyrobert.com. If you're interested in buying, selling, or investing in real estate, feel free to check it out. You can right here at this magical little tab, you can schedule a consultation with me where we carve out 30 minutes to discuss what your needs are or any questions you might have. It's a very streamlined process. It's been working great so far, and I've hooked up with an awful lot of folks. And I appreciate the folks who've reached out to me with different questions or concerns relating to real estate. Feel free to use that to get in touch, and we can absolutely chat about what your specific needs are in terms of what you're looking for, or what you want to do with real estate you currently own, whether you want to sell it, you want to turn it into an investment property. Happy to have those conversations. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about this. For those of you who have listened to my podcast, you know that whenever I am suggesting the tools that you should use to find investment properties or any property really, it's all about having more information. The more information you can have at your fingertips, the better. So I would love to hear how you feel about companies that are now removing crime data from their websites. And there's maybe it's just me, but I find some of this is a little insulting. At least I think it is. So let's go ahead and look at this. Realtor.com and Redfin are taking a stand against crime data being listed on their websites. The real estate companies have removed the data due to growing concerns that it could perpetuate racial inequity. So there is a not even veiled association with higher crime areas being a racial thing. And that may or may not be true. I know of some high crime areas where the racial makeup is not all of one type or another. Does lower income tend to go along those lines? Absolutely. I mean, it would be statistically dishonest to not have honest discussions about those things and how they relate. But here's the deal. I get that they're a website and they can choose what they're going to present. But me as a real estate agent, part of my fiduciary responsibility is to provide all available information to my clients. So two things are going to happen. One, I'm going to stop suggesting, because who was it that stopped? There was a website I used to use all the time that stopped putting crime data included in their searches, and I stopped suggesting it as a tool. When I'm looking as an investor, and I'll tell you what, there is a let me see if they've done it here too. So there is a magical professional version of Realtor.com, meaning when I go, I see other stuff for Realtor.com. So if I go there, and you guys obviously can't see this, I'm doing it in a different window, but when I go, I see a map that shows crime data if I want, right? There's a nice little tab that says crime data. And I find it extremely useful because I am interested in having all the data possible about a home I'm going to potentially buy. And the reality is, if I can't get it there, I'm going to find it somewhere else, right? I mean, I'll do a search for crime statistics independent of this site, and I will simply do a side-by-side comparison, right? But let's see if they've turned it off for me for the professional search edition. Let's go to the map. I want to see how dedicated they are to this ethical stand they're taking on not letting you see data. I've been looking at a place called Prescott, Arizona for investments, and prices have actually gone up quite a bit lately. No, see, I still see a crime button, which is super handy, and I use it all the time. So I may keep using that. However, let's now, in a way that you can see, so that this is slightly more compelling video. Let's go ahead and go to Realtor.com. Whoops. I want to make sure I can still see the chat. I don't want anyone to get upset. All right, now let's go ahead and do a search. I was looking for investment properties in Galveston, Texas the last time I used this. Let's go ahead and look in Morgan Hill. There we go. And let's see what it shows us. Does it show us? Yeah, and that's something else to be interested in is I'm finding in a lot of listings now that claim to be single family residential homes, they're actually mobile homes, which is definitely not a single family. Okay, yeah, see, it's gone. They've removed the button. So they've removed the button for consumers, but they haven't removed the button for real estate agents on the professional site. I don't understand that. And again, it's insulting. It's insulting to every buyer out there who's interested in buying real estate. Let's see if Trulia is doing it. Trulia has for a while got rid of it. Trulia was my original go-to site. Let's go ahead and just do San Jose. I apologize for the speed, man. Once I get the streaming going and everything else going, my machine tends to grind to a halt. I'm actually working on a system that will be far more interesting. And I realize no one cares. But it'll actually it'll delegate the streaming responsibilities to a different computer so that it's not taxing this machine. All right. So now it used to be in the good old days that at this level, and I don't think it's going to do it here. Yeah. Show list. Okay, fine. At this level, you used to be able to click a button that would let you filter it different ways so that you could see a crime map at this level. But what they ended up doing was making it only available at the house level. So in other words, you have to be looking at a very specific house. Man, does this slow down. Hopefully with fewer results on the search, we'll get something better. But let's go ahead, because this is information that you could use, right? Where can I go to get decent 1.5 million for a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,700 square foot home? Does anyone else think that's nuts? All right, so here we go. Yes, you can still do crime. You can still check crime on a specific house. So they've made a compromise. What they have made is a scenario where if you find a house you like, as a secondary thing, you can then go and look for what the crime rate is in that area comparative to that area in general, right? And the darker the color, the more crime. But they don't want you to exclude your search for a property based on higher crime areas. Now that's exactly what I do. When I'm looking for an investment property, I don't want the worst on the spectrum. I don't want the high crime area. So in a map like this, let's go ahead and look at this. This is kind of an interesting tidbit, right? So when I'm helping people find properties, I actually have clients who want more challenged properties because they realize investors won't look there. And the idea is that they'll get a greater discount and there's a higher probability of getting positive cash flow later as different areas see crime levels reduced, right? So there's always that hope. So in this particular spectrum, where this is the highest, I would normally not look for an investment property in one of these really challenging areas. But it also depends, right? If you smartly approach this, you'll note that in most cases, these things also tell you what were the crimes that were being reported. If I'm a guy who's got a rental property, what I might do is take a look at these. It's like this is stolen vehicle, auto theft, and these are probably the same report, right? But these are all relating to car stuff, stolen vehicle, or probably, or vehicle burglary. So that's what all of this is. If I was seeing crime of a different, so I'm actually not as worried about crimes on automobiles, but if I was seeing, shots fired or physical harm stuff, right? As an investor, I would be more concerned, and that was his criteria. His criteria was, I'm perfectly fine with higher crime areas. I just don't want violent crimes. So that was his shtick, and he was cool with that. And that really is something you need to decide for yourself as far as what makes sense and what's important. I prefer to go down here. I prefer to select something from the middle maybe something that strolls up into this zone if the nature of what's going on there is nonviolent. See, if there's okay, this is oh wow, okay, so they changed it so that it's you actually get to see what's what. Let's zoom back in and try that again because all I was seeing were thefts. Before it used to just do all of them. So assaults. Oh wow, see that's the physical stuff is bad. Vandalism is another thing. I'd rather not have a whole lot of vandalism being done in my neighborhood because it obviously might happen to my house and I'd be responsible for that. And then there's burglaries. So burglaries are another one that I like to try to avoid. So you can see that they're tending to happen in certain areas, even within crime areas. They tend to group. So, and it's about defining what your personal philosophy is on investing, but then it's also where do I want to live. So I think that by blocking that information, if I know in my head as a buyer I refuse to live in a place with above average crime, that is something that I'm going to do, whether or not Trulia or Realtor.com or Redfin let me see it at the top level of my search. But not wanting to live in a high crime area, no one should feel guilty about that, right? Wanting to live in an area where you're either at, the middle band or lower in terms of crime, absolutely you shouldn't feel guilty about that. That is not something that you should think you're committing some social atrocity because you want to live someplace with less crime, where you don't want your house to get broken into. You don't want your windows broken. I mean, San Francisco is insane, right? San Francisco is ridiculously expensive, and you're almost guaranteed while you live there of your car getting broken into. In fact, everybody I know who's had to spend time in San Francisco has had their car broken into. In some cases, they went to the trouble of making sure there was nothing visible in their car and even putting a sign on the window that says there's nothing of value in this car. But people were busted open their window and opened up the center console just to see if there was change. There wasn't any. So now this person keeps that open, keeps the center console and even the glove compartment open because they want people to be able to see there's nothing in it. It's insane. So even in areas that are ridiculously expensive and high end, you're seeing that stuff in San Francisco. It's an epidemic. Okay. So we chatted about that. Should we go on to the sexiest story that I think is coming out of this? So let's talk a little bit about an interesting stat that everybody is celebrating. This and even some of the tinfoil hat folks are saying what a wonderful thing this is. I feel like I mentioned this in a podcast recently, but I'm not 100% sure. Or God, was it even this last month? I don't think it was. But the headline that we get is the most housing units are under construction since 1973. I find that to be an interesting thing when you look at how much construction there was going on in 2004, 5, and 6. I would love to see a comparison of that. I mean, that thought actually just occurred to me. But and I know I've seen a chart where leading up to 2005, 6, 7, it was straight up in terms of construction. And I know around here in Morgan Hill, after the downturn, we had a ton of brand new construction that just sat for 2 years unsold. In fact, the company that owned it was even making some of them rentals because they couldn't get them sold. But this is an interesting story because it doesn't really hold up. So if we look, so it's the 1 unit ones. So if we look, the only reason they're making this work is if they're counting multi and single units, right? So here's the red one going all the way back to 1970. You can see that yes, in 2006, which is what I just said, is the peak. And it lasted from about 2001 up to 2006, where people just built like crazy, right? And then everybody stopped building, and now we're recovering. And we are not even, I would argue, we are not even at a normal level given the realities on the ground today, because we have a huge backlog of people who want to buy, who can't because of inventory problems, right? So let's put that to bed right away. Yes, absolutely. Single family home construction is not at the highest point it's been since 1974 or 1972. It is single family residential peaked at 2006, as I said. Which it's only when you combine the two, right, where you see this interesting thing. And the only reason this is in existence, this multi-unit thing as such a thing, is because it's there are no choices, right? There's nothing out there. So we are so far behind that higher resources than have historically been seen. And remember, this multifamily construction isn't just the highest since 1972, 73. This is it's never been higher, right? I mean, there's never been so much demand. And why? Because along these times, while this was also kind of steadily increasing, there was plenty of single family residential homes to be had in the marketplace. The problem is we weren't building enough. So now they're having to just house people, and they're finding that multifamilies are higher density, higher profit, and get more people into a place to live, which is all fine. Let's see here. Let me go back. Okay. But let's think about this for a second. 1973, right? It's at its highest level since 1973, which still isn't at 1973 levels, really, right? If we take each separately. The single family residential construction rate is definitely higher than it was in 1973, but it's not higher than it was. And I don't think right now we want to be at where it was in 2006. I think we should be right around here, which is kind of where we are. But given the realities, I think we need to build more homes and then maybe level out and reduce a little bit just to make up for the inventory that we haven't been building for so long. But let's take into account another stat. If we want to say this is some sort of number to celebrate, well, what was the U.S. population in 1973? The U.S. population here. This is the stat. U.S. populations from 1950 to 1921, and this is from 1974 to 2020. You can see it's gone up a bit. In fact, in 1972-73, it was 215 million, and in 2020, it was 332 million, almost 333 million. If we do the math, and I'm showing it to you here so that you can trust the math, the percent increase is 53.3%. So in order for us to feel good about that, as if feeling good about a number is a thing we should do, that number from 1973 or 74 should be 53.3% higher in order for us to feel like we're meeting demand. If we accept the assumption that demand for housing is at least in some way dependent on the population of people that need a house, right? So not only should we not take comfort from this, we should wonder why it's not 53% higher. Now, what we want to do really is figure out what's a right number and then move on from there. And I think the right number is right. I think it's a little higher than where we are now. And I also want to you also need to go into the micro of this, right? So in Morgan Hill, for instance, a whole lot of our new construction has been higher end homes. We talked about the development that's right at the bottom of the hill where I live, which is Dunn and Hill, and those homes all sold for over 1.3 million, right? So a lot of that's out of reach for folks. If we want to talk about reasonable housing, we need to let builders build. And I realize that super urban areas have issues, right? There's only so much space available in an urban area. But in suburban areas, like where I am in Morgan Hill, where there's huge stretches of area that aren't developed, maybe making it a little easier for folks to develop in those areas is the right way to go. So we need to see how that plays out. We already talked about this. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. I honestly think that better crime data should be available. I don't think anyone's shopping needs for a home are being served by removing this information. I think not only should it be available, I think you have a right. You do have a right to it. You have a right to all the information possible, right? If there's anything that people repeat over and over in real estate, it's do your due diligence. And part of that is, well, how much crime is there, right? If someone has been killed on a property, Well, that's stuff that you get to know. It seems to me that being able to easily convey that data should be a thing. Now, I would actually love to see uh, the crime statistics available in our MLS data, but they don't do that. All right, what else did we find here? Here was another article that came across the desk that sounded kind of interesting. Single family and multifamily starts. Oh, okay, well, it's the same story. Sorry. Um, Combined single family and multifamily starts are 24.4% higher in the Northeast, right? Which is, I don't care about, I don't live in the Northeast. I don't live in Maine. But that's where it's happening. And I think that's why we're not seeing a whole lot of this impacting here. And I think the stuff that we do see um, tends to cater to a market that isn't going to help the average person. 24% for higher in the Northeast, 9.6% higher in the Midwest, 15.4% higher in the South, and 19.4% higher in the West year to date from January to November of 2021. Overall permits increased 3.6, and single family permits increased 2.7. Multifamily permits increased 5.2%. Permits are 13.6% higher in the Northeast. Where are they? Where are we in the West? And 22.4%. So that's actually pretty good news that we're seeing that. I hope these turn out. I mean, I try to keep abreast of the latest new home building plans that there are, or new communities that are being created. And I really haven't seen anything that makes me think there's a builder that's really trying to get to the heart of the housing problem by building homes that are reasonably priced. And I've made this argument before. I think if we really want to fix this, there needs to be a whole lot of government getting out of the way. If we were just to roll back regulations, say to the year 2000, I don't think anyone would be concerned about buying a home that was built in 1999, right? I don't think there's any code or any other requirement that was in place in 1999 that anyone feels uncomfortable with. And I don't feel that anything, if we were to erase all requirements that have been heaped on since 1999, I don't feel like anyone who buys a house that would be built under those circumstances, which would mean a house older than 2000, I don't feel like anyone would think that's an unsafe house to buy and live in, right? And when I say roll things back, I don't just mean rules and regulations, I mean fees. A ton of fees were heaped on in the 2000s that were really reflective of governments and municipalities wanting to cash in on the boom in real estate that never went away. Despite all the things that have happened, none of those communities stepped away from continuing to charge that stuff. And I think that we would see a much more robust housing market if they got out of the way. And even, and I'm not a guy who promotes government interference, but government interference is already there, right? So it's really about what kind of government interference can you put into place that makes sense. So in my case, I think that if you really want to do what you claimed you want to do with all these other regulations, get rid of all your regulations and simply create an incentive program that says, hey, you know what? If you build a house that will ultimately list at, say, 10% below the average price in the community where you're building it, we will give you a huge discount on taxes and fees and whatever else we typically charge. Or one commensurate, right? Maybe it's banded. If you're selling at 10% below mark what the average is, if you're selling at 20% below what the average is, you get, the more you're cutting below the market, the more of a discount you get on the fees and taxes and other things that you normally get charged when you build something. If it really is about helping the consumer, then reducing the amount of money that actually goes into the government and leaving more hands in the pockets of the people who are doing the buying seems like what you'd want to do, right? None of that will happen, though, because what politicians want is money in the general fund. They don't care if it's still in your hands because, sadly for them, money spent by a politician is more wisely spent than money spent by you and I. So at least that seems to be the prevailing trend. All right, so we covered that one. What else have we got? Thousands of potential appraisal bias cases. So again, this is another one where I think you have to think your way through it. The specific example they gave, which I thought was an interesting one. Earlier this month, it was reported that a black couple from San Francisco had filed a lawsuit against an appraiser who valued their home at $989,000, barely more than they paid for it. Okay, well, when did they buy it? Right? There's significant information missing from what this allegation is. against an appraiser who valued their home at $98,000, spending thousands of dollars to upgrade the property. The couple later had a second appraisal done, only that time they had a white friend pose as the owner of the home, and the appraised value suddenly jumped to almost $1.5 million. Okay, so we're talking two different appraisers. They didn't get the same appraiser twice because clearly the first appraiser would know they're going to the same house they went to before. So what I would want to do is look at those appraisals. The other thing is how much time passed between when you got the appraisal done the first time and when you got the appraisal done the second time. We have seen property values jumping insanely, particularly in San Francisco and our markets here, by giant numbers over just a month. We had a 10% increase just month to month. That would mean that home would have appraised for $1.1 million if there was just a month between those two things, right? So there's that. Second, what are the properties that are being used as comparables? It might be that homes in that time frame sold. And I would bet that they did. And I would also bet that it was at least a month between the first one and the second one, if not more. And if it was more, this argument becomes more and more sketchy, right? If there was a month or 2 months, some handful of homes that were comparable would have sold. And if in that neighborhood, suddenly homes were selling for 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 that weren't comparables before because they weren't on the market and they hadn't sold yet, that is something that you need to take into consideration. Immediately jumping to bias is an interesting way to go. But frankly, I think it is so rare, if it happens at all, that it is statistically insignificant. I don't think any of these people care. Appraisers do not care. Let's see. The problem of appraisal bias is complicated by the fact that much of it is not intentional. That's not the one I was interested in. One thing that I thought was interesting was they cited one example of a description that appraisers use in different areas. So one example, thousands of appraisals happen in a month in the county, just the county. So tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands happen in the state, and they've got one, which stated the area in question was originally founded as whites-only city or sundown town. Is that a statement? What is that? And that is a statement of fact. There are communities in Santa Cruz, Campbell, San Jose that were founded as whites-only cities. What this appraiser has done is simply looked up the original documents for various communities and basically copy and pasted data relating to that community. So is that in and of itself some sort of racism, stating how things were? Next, but has since become fairly diverse with a diverse school system. So is that wrong? It would have become diverse, right? Is that a statement of racism? And if this is the one example they picked, which I'm not sure is an example of what they're trying to prove, if this is the worst case scenario, I'm just not. I'm not sure where the get upset part is yet. And they say that because of statements like that, which would likely be a statement of fact, by updating industry they want to update industry norms and the type of neighborhood information that is appropriate to include, and moving neighborhood descriptions away from the examples we shared above. Examples, the one example, the single example that they could cite. So I don't know. I don't know where we're going. See, what concerns me is this flag gets waved a lot in the name of creating programs that facilitate poorly considered decisions relating to home lending and all kinds of other things. And we've talked about this. I think it should simply be based on the numbers, right? But good numbers. What's your credit rating? Do you pay your bills on time? Does your income meet the amount of debt you're taking on? And constantly these things are often being skewed one direction or another. We talked about this, I think, in last month's show, where the first time around, we simply ignored credit ratings and let people borrow on stated income and borrow and borrow and borrow, and everybody got hosed. This time we're saying, oh, we're really paying attention to credit ratings, but what we have done is now lowered the reliability of credit ratings by considering things that shouldn't be good credit rating indicators as good credit rating indicators, and things that should be considered bad credit indicators we ignore completely. We covered that in the last month's show. If you want to replay that one and check it out, it's in the Facebook archive, and I think it's also up on YouTube as a separate video. So feel free to check that out. So I don't know. I feel like if this is it, if you're writing a story like this, you would think you'd come out with your biggest guns, and I'm just not seeing a lot of boom there. But I'd love to get your opinions. What do you think? I mean, do you have an appraisal story where you feel like your appraisal was biased based on racial stuff? I think lending is one of the more silly areas. Lenders want to make money. Underwriter, I really don't see the motivation. If the primary color a lot of these folks see is green, I don't get it. I get people might be upset because their credit rating isn't great, or they didn't get the loan because they didn't meet the numbers. But really, if it shouldn't even be a question. If there is a person trying to get a loan and they fill out that loan with all the same data, it would seem ridiculously easy to prove some sort of bias related to race if it's strictly based on race, because it's all about a computer spitting out an approval. Very little of it is a human being looking at your situation. It's all math by and large. Maybe a little human interaction if you're dealing with some niche lenders, particularly lenders that continue to hold the paper, meaning they don't sell it on the secondary market, which most banks do. And for those of you who've ever bought a house or anything big, you know that you may start with XYZ lender, but you'll suddenly get a notice that suddenly Wells Fargo now owns your loan, or Penny owns your loan, or Bank of America now owns your loan. In fact, over the course of your loan, it may change hands multiple times as it gets sold in the secondary market. So all the bigger banks tend to do that stuff. They do not give a crap what color you are. They like the color of your money, and that's it. The other thing I wanted to talk about today, and we're going a little over, it's just past 11. Thanks to the folks who've stuck with me. We're talking about escalation clauses in the end here, because I've never been a huge fan of escalation clauses. I actually planned on doing a podcast about this, and I may still, but an escalation clause is something that people put into a contract that says, here's our offer, but if you get an offer that's higher than our offer, we will go $1 over that offer, up to a limit of whatever, is normally the way they're written. I've seen some agents write it so that there is no top limit. And then they figure they can just reject it after that if it comes to that, right? Because normally a scenario like that where you've done that, it's also written so that if the seller does get into that scenario where you're now agreeing on a price that's $1 over the other highest price, there's an additional signature on the part of the buyer that's required. So you are still a little bit protected, but it can get interesting if it's not worded correctly. So what do we do with these? Now, I am not an escalation clause guy. Have I used escalation clauses? Yes. It is a tool of last resort for me, but I also think it is a super lazy and sloppy way of handling an offer, which can be more effectively managed through one-to-one communication with the listing agent. If you get a listing agent who is a complete boob and doesn't want to talk to people, and they exist, particularly today, you get a lot of listing agents who are simply what I like to call puppy mill agents, meaning they're not applying a whole lot of thought to what they're doing. They have a step-by-step of what they do. They somehow manage to get people to list their homes with them, and they simply rely on the market situation to manage the sale of the property. They're not doing anything above and beyond. They're not getting extra eyeballs on properties, and they're just about churning it out, and they're about convincing their clients to accept the highest offer, right? So in my situation, and buyers who've worked with me over the last year, over 2021, all the way from those folks we did that interview with a few weeks back, up to folks after that, None of them had an escalation clause included, because I think they're dopey. I think they're dopey for a couple of reasons. One, you are leaving in the hands of the other side with a vested interest in getting the highest price possible, communicating back to you a fact that may or may not be a fact, which will determine whether or not you're spending tens to hundreds of thousands over what you offered originally. Now, I am not a distrustful fella, but I do believe in trust but verify. So part of an escalation clause that I will do is that a copy of the first page of their offer has to be included with the agreement to an increased price. So in other words, when I write my escalation clause, I write it in the way I described a moment ago. I said, usually I'll say, we are, and I'll do it as a separate addendum. I like it to be on its own page. I don't like to squeeze it into that weird little section on the purchase agreement where you can add stuff. I like to make sure it's got plenty of room and there's plenty of stuff describing what I want. We will, if you receive any offers over our offer, we will go $1 above that offer up to a maximum of X amount of dollars, which is dumb because you're now communicating the maximum amount you're willing to pay. which is never a good thing when you're negotiating. But then again, there are people who simply abandon negotiation and just want to get the house, which I think is a bad mental place to be as a buyer. But then I'll also say, if this escalation clause is invoked by the seller, we will require a copy of the front page of the offer that we are competing against. And you would be surprised how vehemently some agents get upset about that. Now, I get that there can be privacy concerns in terms of giving out somebody else's name that's on a document. And I have had instances where I've said, feel free to black out the names of the buyers on it, but please continue to include the name of the agent who represents them, because that's on the front page, because I want to verify that offer was submitted. I had, and before anyone goes nuts, because particularly agents go nuts on this one whenever I discuss it. Although, you know what, escalation clauses are not that common. I haven't had to do one in forever. I think the last time I did an escalation clause was probably in the crazy, crazy times of 2006. And even then, the circumstances were such that there was a sense of urgency on the part of my buyers that was really unusual. So we kind of had to make things happen, and we ended up using it. And I used this. There was one scenario where, and this is going back a few years, I don't think it was in the 2006 timeframe. I think it was the last big crazy one in the late 90s. But I did one of these, and the selling agent was like, "Hey, we've got this up, but I can't give you the front page." And we went back and forth, and say, well, how can I satisfy my buyers that the offer they're competing against is real? Well, we're telling you that it's real. Okay, well, I understand that, and I fully appreciate it, but I need to be able to go back and say, here is the offer we're beating, and that's why you're paying, $50,000 higher than we offered. And I go, because if not, we're not going to move forward with it. I'll be honest with you, at that point, something stunk. So oddly enough, we ended up paying what our offer was. And our offer was literally the asking price of the property. So draw whatever conclusions you might, but I get the feeling that in that particular scenario, there wasn't really another offer. How often does that happen in an escalation scenario? No idea. In a market like today, where we see dozens of offers all coming in for properties, it's the odds are, yeah, you are competing against other real offers. But in this world, when somebody tells you something, you need to be able to back it up with proof. And when you're dealing with escalation clauses that can potentially cost clients tons more money, the idea of just taking at face value what's going on, I don't think is smart. So as a call out to other agents out there, to those of you who may abuse stuff like this, shame on you. To those of you who approach this more intelligently, good. I'm glad somebody is. And I think that's it. I think we hit everything. Yeah. So, hopefully didn't break too many dreams relating to this whole most housing starts since 1973. Um, I love that they phrase it like this, right? If you just read the headline, you'd think, oh, wow, single family homes. No, they're not talking about single family homes. They're talking about single family and multis, which is actually great for me. I'm looking forward to seeing more multis on the market. When I'm looking in Morgan Hill and I'm looking for duplexes, there's this neighborhood in Morgan Hill that's like got a whole row of duplexes. I would love to own one of those duplexes. Those duplexes are awesome, but they come up on the market and they are a ridiculous amount of money. And they rarely come up ever. And when they do come up, they sell in a heartbeat, which makes it real hard to do the math and make them work financially as an investment. But if you wanted to house hack, a duplex is the way to go. I mean, and a house hack, for those of you who are new, is you buy a duplex or any other multi-unit, 1 to 4 to start off is preferred, and we can talk about why that is later. But a duplex is a perfect start, where you live in one half and you rent out the other half, and odds are, if you're doing things right, the rent in that second half is paying most if not all of your mortgage, right? You in most cases, if you're doing things right, it's hard to do in Morgan Hill. You end up having that second rent just help. But in a lot of cases, you can do it where what you're charging for rent in that second unit is coming real close or covering your mortgage, which is fantastic. Now, we just say mortgage there. It may not also do taxes and other things that once everything gets added up, it may be a little bit more. But by and large, that's a great way to house hack because you're getting advantage of a loan for a owner-occupied property that you don't get if you do an investment property, which is usually more expensive, always more expensive. So, and you can just keep doing that. Buy a duplex, live in it for a year or 2 years while you save up for buying another home, do it again, but now you're renting the one you just left. So now that's covering itself, hopefully, with much more cash flow. Do that a few times, and you've suddenly got 10 rental units that you're dealing with, where you're making anywhere from, say, $500 to $1,000+ a month. That's not bad, right? To start suddenly making an extra $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month if you've got 10 units. And that only requires owning 5 duplexes. And of course, it multiplies when you go up to, say, 3 units and then 4 units. And once you go over 4 units, you'll never get that magical loan number again, right? You can't do owner occupied on 5 or more units in a construction unit. So anyway, all right. So we're about 15 minutes past the usual time. I appreciate you spending time with me today. I hope you have a fantastic Sunday. I've got some hot properties I want to go look at a little further south today. I might be heading back to Salinas and checking a few things out. The only other thing I wanted to say is congratulations to my son who graduated from Berkeley yesterday. I couldn't be more proud of him. I think as parents, we have sort of in our heads this moment where we feel like, the job of parenting is kind of done. And I feel like I'm kind of there. I mean, I'm happy to be there as a guy for him to talk to and discuss his future and help him figure out smart ways to go. But, sitting there, so I realize we're supposed to be done, but you can stop now. I'm not going to talk about real estate anymore. I'm now just talking about how much I love my son and how proud I am of him. So he graduated with a degree in political science, and he's thinking about law school. Maybe not. He's having second thoughts now, but he wants to take some time off and sort of figure out where he wants to go, which is fine. I remember being 22 and out of college as well, and I know how difficult a choice it can be to figure out where you're going to go. But so, I love my son completely. He's amazing. He's a great kid. And I hope he never sees this because I don't want him to realize how much, how awesome I think he is. But, I foresaw issues. So I went up the day before and I stayed in a hotel because I just didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to deal with the traffic. I didn't want to deal with the crush of people. So rented a place and a hotel right across the street from Berkeley, walking distance to the venue. And I loved the hotel. For those of you who follow me on Instagram, I stayed at a historical hotel that was built in the 30s, and I am a total geek for that stuff. So I spent most of Friday night walking around. They offered me a complimentary drink when I got there, so had one of those and walked around the building and just soaked it up. So much character in buildings from that time frame in the early 30s. Just really cool stuff. So I geeked out on that for a while, and then shared a view from my room on the top floor, which was great. I didn't ask for the top floor, but it sure was nice of him to give it to me. Um, so my son didn't have his COVID passport that he needed in order to walk into the venue. He left it at my house, so I had it. And so the night before, I'm like, why don't you stop by? I know you have a final. Why don't you come by my place? He had a final that ended at 10 o'clock on Friday night. I said, why don't you just stop by my hotel and I'll give it to you? Oh, no, I'm at home. I'll pick it up in the morning. Okay. Well, my understanding was that he was supposed to be at the venue by 8:30 and it was going to start at 9. So he doesn't end up showing up till like, I don't know. It must have been 8:30 when he finally showed up. I give him his COVID card. He's like, hey, yeah, so my phone just died and I had my ticket to enter the venue as a graduate on my phone. So what shall we do about that? So I had his mother had bought the tickets for the thing. So I said, just send me a digital version. So she sent me a PDF of it. And I was just going to walk with him until they asked for it and then show it to him and walk away. But it became impractical simply because it was now past 8:30 and the line for other people to get into the venue was ridiculous. So despite the fact I got there hours early, I'm having to do the dad sacrifice and stand out with my son in this crazy line. So gave him my phone. So of course I can no longer communicate with my parents or my sister or his mom or anybody else about where I am or where they are. And got into the venue finally. Ended up sitting kind of, I guess, nosebleed. It wasn't that bad though. It was a good view. But what was funny was just I felt so liberated not having my phone in my hand. I didn't feel like I needed to check anything or take pictures or do any of these things. So I got to just sort of sit and enjoy it. And it was so cool watching everyone react in this moment where you had people who maybe this was the very first person in their family who'd ever graduated from college, or people who, were super proud of their kid that they themselves had struggled so much to help support them through it. It was really an amazing kind of feeling, and it's something I hope all of you get a chance. For those of you who have kids in college, it's an amazing experience. I encourage you to get out of it all you can and enjoy it. But so the event is over. I still have no way to communicate with everyone. I know that we're all meeting to go to lunch to a place there in Berkeley, so I know I can find that. I know I'm not that big of an idiot that I can't find a restaurant without the help of my phone. But I figure, hey, maybe knowing my son, he will go to the last place we met, which was where we met up in the morning to give him his COVID thing, which was right there at the front of the venue, right along the street where the little quad area leads into the front of the east side of the Haas Pavilion where the event was held. So I'm standing there and all the kids are coming out and they're hugging their moms and their dads and their aunts and their uncles and all the different languages, from Chinese to Urdu to Ukrainian and Southern accents and Midwestern accents. Just everything's out there. Everybody's enjoying it and everybody's having a good time. What struck me as odd is, so here's someone who just graduated from a super prestigious college, right? UC Berkeley's considered prestigious, I think, right? It's a top tier school. Maybe not the tippy top, but it's right up there. Is it top 10? I think it is. So she spots her parents and she yells out, "Hey, I'm finally a bachelorette." And my head kind of went to, all right, so either she just misspoke or she doesn't get that that's not the word for a woman who just graduated from college. Maybe she is a bachelorette. I'm sure she probably is, but that didn't really have anything to do with her recently received bachelor's degree. And I thought that was kind of funny. I'm going to go with she just misspoke, that it was a slip of the tongue. But at the time, it struck me as kind of funny. And so there you are. There is my graduation story. And then, of course, my son did ultimately show up. I did ultimately get my phone back. But it was good. It was a currently unique experience, not having a phone in my hand, with people pinging me left and right and doing all these different things, and able to just sit and enjoy the experience. And I think I'm going to enjoy the memory better assuming I don't just get stricken with Alzheimer's and forget my own name, more than the photos that I might have taken during that time. I think it was great. They mispronounced his name, but hey, you can't have everything. Anyway, all right, so thanks again for taking time with me today. I hope you're having a fantastic weekend. If you have any kids that just graduated from college in the winter of 2021, I hope it was as fun of an experience for you as it was for me, and I can't wait to see what these kids do. I have a lot of faith in my kids, and I think they're going to do great things. But anyway, have a great day. I will talk to you all next month unless you hit me up at my website, where you can also subscribe to the feed for my podcast. Not happening at the frequency I would like. I'm still only doing a couple a month, but I'd like to at least get into a groove where I'm doing one a month. I've got tons of stories I've put into the queue to do podcasts on, but I'd love to see you over there as well. And feel free to ask any questions. What I've decided to do is for folks who ask questions after the live chat is over, I will roll those into being answered in the next live chat so that everyone can benefit from the answers. So feel free to send those along through the website at soldbyrobert.com if you'd like to ask them. Thanks again for listening, everybody. Spending a little time with me, and we'll chat again next month.